Wow, you know, this is truly a trip down memory lane. And all of you, God bless you. I'm looking around at the faces and people that I've interacted with for some brief moments and for many years with some of you. My family started out in the mountains of western North Carolina, a place called Roan Mountain. It's the second highest peak on the East Coast next to Mount Mitchell. And so that's where my mother's people came from. She was Pearl Honeycutt. She met my father, William Forrest McCarthy, at a train station in Johnson City, Tennessee. He was coming through on the railroad. He was a railroad man. He'd fought in World War I and was, shall we say, a real rounder from Boston and Massachusetts. So he met her there. They went on back up to the mountains and there in western North Carolina, the Roan, and with the Honeycutts. And so they had this McCarthy fellow there in their midst, and they were all Honeycutts and Buchanans and Moffats and Mosleys. So I went to first grade there, and I went to the first grade, and they said, "You're a foreigner." And I said, "Why, what do you mean?" And they said, "'Cause your last name's McCarthy, and ain't nobody around here by that last name." So I started calling myself Henry Honeycutt, because I was named. We all get names for different people. And Henry Honeycutt and the Honeycutt men were known as good fighters, which you had to be up in there. They didn't take things, if they took things personal, they settled it that way. So he was Big Henry and I was Little Henry, and they always talked about how Big Henry, if he got real quiet, and I'll get back to that a little later, then you knew there was going to be a problem. So anyway, I went to the first grade at Beulah Dean Elementary School, and basically we just played outside. And our teacher just took us out and let us pick apples and everything. Long late fall, our parents said, "We're moving back to Johnson City," because Dad was always restless, and they'd met there. And so we moved there, and so we went to first grade there and played ball in Kiwanis Park. Grew up playing ball in Kiwanis Park with a fellow by the name of Steve Spurrier. Some of you may know that he's in the Football Hall of Fame, both as a coach and as a player, Heisman Trophy. And somewhere along about 12, we veered off, and he got a lot better than I did. But I was going to talk just a brief bit about my immediate family, because there was my mom and dad, and then there were my brothers. Hey, sweetie, there's Megan coming in, Sheppard, and hello, Sutton. You guys take a seat back there. We're going to get around to, I'm going to talk about them. So anyway, we had my mother and father, and then I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And right now I have 2 sisters, and the 2 brothers have passed away. One last week at this time. This is Wednesday. So I would have been out there giving him some Coke and then water. And he was into his final stages. And there's being Irish, and a good bit of my background is Irish, and I had to recover that part. But there's an old saying among the Irish that life's tragic, but it ain't serious. And I can tell you that carries you through many, many different situations. And so I went out there on Wednesday. I said, "Johnny, this is Henry. You know me?" I said, "Johnny, this is Henry. You know me?" Why the hell wouldn't I? This is 2 days before he died. I know you. And so life, as you know, life moves on. And there are 2 words I'd like to give you today. One is affirmation and transformation, because we're all transforming and transitioning. And so we affirm and we transition in this life, as you know. And I've been very blessed, as you have. And I'm certainly blessed to be here today. And there comes John Tashner from Appalachian State. John, come on in. And so anyway, talking about my immediate family very quickly, Tanya. So we had, I had Sister Rose, who is now going on 93. And then I had Brother Billy, who passed away a couple years ago. And by the way, Ivy hopefully will be here. If not, Ivy Sheppard's a great producer. And we did a show together, and we took Brother Billy's, you may have heard it on podcast because it gets such a good listeners, we did my funeral oration for Brother Billy. And so it went over quite well. So there was Brother Billy, and then Johnny, who passed away last Friday. And then there is Edna, and she's here, and she was a great big sister. I had two great sisters. Yes, and Brenda Humphrey, and you know Edna, you all go way back to teaching and so forth. So anyway, we came on down to Winston-Salem, and I landed in Walltown in the 8th grade at Walltown Elementary. Sometimes you say Walltown now, and people run and lock their cars. But anyway, back then we had a great growing up, and we had our, you think about this and you reflect and you want to talk about how hard you had it. But basically, you also had a lot of affirmation from a lot of gentle people. So Walltown and then the Gray High School, Tommy and Nancy McCoon here. It's just great seeing you guys. And the summertime, we played ball. We played ball all the time. That's what we did. And my father, being Irish, one of his statements always was, get up and get out. And my mother's was, where there's a will, there's a way. And I took that to heart, and I've been moving ever since. So after the summer when we won the state championship, and I've talked about that, and Tommy and I have talked about it, and Nancy knows about it. What we did, Tommy, folks won't appreciate, but we know what we did. And we won the state championship, and we came out of Walltown, and we beat kids from Reynolds and all around Charlotte and every place else. I go in Ernie Shore Field now, and that's one reason this baseball glove I have here. My brother Johnny, the one I was telling you about, Bocock Stroud, he went down to Bocock Stroud, and he signed for me to get that baseball glove because, when you're a little leaguer, you play little leaguer. My mother had $4.50. We needed 50 more cents, so that was Ben's Sporting Goods in Johnson City. So the baseball glove was always so much a part of me, and that's a Hutch. I wanted a Rawlings, but this was $11 and the Rawlings was $12. So I got the Hutch, and it was the Hutch clutch, and we won the city championship, and Tommy was a great pitcher and so forth, and this was Ernie Shore Field where Wake Forest plays now. Of course, it had wooden benches and chicken wire, but I remember that so well. Tommy, I played center field. We were 5-5, and he'd yell at me out there when it went over my head. I was playing center. Can't you catch the ball? And you know what? I'd yell back at you. Can't you pitch it so they can't hit it? But came down. He pitched about every game. Came down to 5-5, and probably the 9th inning. And I'm going to tell you the inside of knowing people and the human aspect of this. Now we're going to measure balls and strikes with a machine. All right, that's going to happen. But here's the deal. As my favorite president says, here's the deal. The day before the final championship game against Charlotte, I was carrying newspapers out in Walltown down Sprague Street, or down Marble Street, and a fella came out of his house, and I gave him a newspaper, and he said, you boys from Walltown playing for the state championship tomorrow? And I said, yes. Never seen this man. He said, yes, I know. I'm one of the umpires. Now, Tommy, I don't think I've ever told this. I told John that. So we get there, and it was really a tight game and a good game, and John hit a home run. He's 15 out of Ernie Shore Field. And we tied up. I get up to the plate, and I take 2 balls, 2 strikes, and here's the deal. The third one I took was a strike. It came right down the middle. Guess who's calling behind the plate? I'm not saying that neighbor threw me one. He called it a ball, and I thought, that ball was a strike. I'm swinging on the next pitch, and I drove in the winning run, Tommy. All right, enough about baseball. James A. Gray High School, went to high school, talked all the time, better talker than I was ball player, so Daisy Lee Glasgow called me at home and said, Henry, I'm putting you in freshman dramatics. So I'm putting you in dramatics. Now this is Southside Gray High School. They had 3 years of dramatics, Nancy, you know what I'm saying. And so I said, Miss Glasgow, I can't do that. She said, what do you mean? I said, all the kids will make fun of him. And Daisy Lee Glasgow, you didn't argue with her. She said, you will be in drama 1, young man. And I said, yes, ma'am. And I'm telling you, that really changed my life. We went on, Kitty Bartholomew. Kitty Bartholomew, Phi Beta Kappa from Wake Forest, cheerleader. Married Bob Bartholomew, All-America football player, pro football player. She lands there. She is the drama teacher. She had been into drama with Walton, James Walton here. So anyway, she gets a hold of me, and she's fiery redhead and so forth. And God love her. She was so affirming. So I wind up playing the main role in Our Town, which you guys just sent me the bulletin on. And she calls me aside and she says, Henry, she said, now, she didn't lecture. She just said, she's right there with you. She said, a lot of people have been telling me to put Richard Parker in that role, said, because they don't think that you'll come through. And she said, I know you will, and I'm putting you in that role. And that changed my life. And we did Our Town, we did a lot of other plays, and I will tell you this, Kitty came back for 1 year, and she wasn't there my senior year, but she substituted. And so I didn't star as much. We had a different director. But they went to Miss Bartholomew and said, what should we put Henry in graduation? And the reason I tell you this, it's not just to brag on myself, but it's to brag on her. She said, you put in there that he leaves his superb acting ability to whoever is capable of filling his shoes. Now that's a powerful affirmation to take with you on out. So anyway, a lot of my life was 421 and hitchhiking 421. You know, transportation was always an issue. And I know 421 from, now that they've widened it, it's harder to know. But I can tell you, once you got up in those mountains, and particularly when you got around Mountain City, because I hitchhiked back and forth from Johnson City. And when I was 14 or 15, I hitchhiked back to play ball for the state championship. And I had about 10 cents in my pocket. And I stopped off there. I got there on a Sunday afternoon. I went up, it was down at Beach Creek, right off of 321. And the Mountain family took me in and fed me Spam and eggs and said, what's a little boy like you doing out here hitchhiking? I said, I'm going back to play ball. I went back to see them later on. This is a long story there. There's more to it than that. But anyway, that's a little bit about my early years, and then got to East Tennessee State. I mean, a few of us were going to college there, and so I thought, well, I'd give it a shot. My brother Johnny was a big influence on me because he had to drop out because they didn't have loans and things like that back then. You know, you went as far as you could go, and if you couldn't earn money, you dropped out. So anyway, he encouraged me to go, and I hitchhiked back across the mountain with an old zip-up suitcase and through Boone and so on, landed at East Tennessee State. And I went in and they said, young man, it's good to have you here and so forth. And Tennessee has open admission policies. I don't know if you know that. They'll let you in, then they flunk you out. They don't put a lot of emphasis on, you know, your pedigree or anything else. It's just like, come on in and then get your ass out. But so they call me in, and Jewel Spock, and so many of these people have been in my show and been in my interviews. Jewel Spock, a legend in Winston-Salem, war hero and all, he signed my note for $200 to go to East Tennessee State, and it was a Winston-Salem Foundation note. So I get there, and they call me in, and they said, son, that's real nice and so on, but you owe us another $65. And I said, why? They said, because you're out of state. And I said, well, I've grown up around here and I don't understand that. And they said, I said, I don't have $65. If I have to have $65, I have to leave. And they said, well, wait a minute, because this is a different era. This is person to person. They went over it and they said, well, your parents still got an old house here. And I said, yes, I do. I stay there some. So that way they took that as evidence that I was a resident of Tennessee. And East Tennessee State gave me a great shot and opportunity. And then there I was running around. I enjoyed it so much because I'll tell you one thing, I'd been out in Houston, Texas, was 15 working with my brother. And we knew what it was like and what an education could do for you. So I won't dwell on that, but that summer really matured me. That was about 15. I lied about my age, told them I was 16, got me a job in Foley's department store down in the layaway department. Man alive, I went back there to speak years later, and I said, is Foley's department still there? I could see it. And I was addressing this group, and I didn't share the whole story, but I'd had many different jobs that summer. And one was life circulation. First of all, I went door to door handing out circulars with the Mexican kids. And then secondly, I got a job at Life Circulation Company on the telephone. And you'd say, hello, ma'am, this is Jim Jones of Life Circulation here in the T.J. Bates building, and I'm calling you from Life Circulation about a magazine subscription. Well, we had red lines those days, and they give you this big outline and catalog and say, now don't call any of these neighborhoods. I called them. I signed up everybody. Everybody's like, sure, send them on out and everything. Well, come the end of the month, when they started asking for the subscription fees, all these people had canceled out, Brenda. You see what I mean? So anyway, they decided that I should move on, and I agreed. And I got me a job at Foley's Department, huge Foley's Department store. And they said, how old are you? And I said 16, which I was 15. And they said, well, we're going to put you down in the layaway department. Now, you remember layaway departments? This was under the street in Houston, Texas in the summer with no air conditioning. All right, well, I did that the rest of the summer. And I remember that I had the guy who was over layaway. First of all, I couldn't keep up with the binning. So it would come down this big chute, conveyor belt, and you're supposed to run and grab it and take all these boxes and bin them and write down where you got them. Well, guess what? I got behind. I started just flipping those boxes for everything. So, come fall, I decided it was a good opportunity, and Johnny was working. He was actually working in a very good men's clothing store out there, and he took me down and outfitted me and so forth. And I went in and told the manager of the department store, I never will forget, he had a big scar straight down through here. And I said, he said, well, why are you quitting? I think I was the only one who'd worked there for 2 or 3 months and the whole time. And I said, well, I'll tell you, it's a lousy job. And you know what he said to me? He said, son, you're going to have lousy jobs all your life. And I used that to my advantage. And somewhere, if he's up there, God bless you. But I did better than that. So anyway, came back and did that. Went to, as I said, East Tennessee State, met Patty. There was this young lady in my freshman class, and was general science, and Dr. Roselle. And I talked all the time. She sat back in the back, and I entertained the class, which I'd done in high school. Well, you know, college is a little different than high school, and you don't get extra points for entertainment, do you? No. So the only semester in college that I ever had below a 3.0 was that semester, and it was 2.9. And I got a C in that class, and I was getting an F until the final exam, because Dr. Roselle couldn't figure me out, and I couldn't figure out, and God love her. I mean, she was trying to deal with me as best she could, but I never will forget, I made the highest grade in the class on the exam, and I remember she told that fellow that was older, who was everybody's mentor, she said, now that little boy beat you on that. Said, now couldn't you do better than that? Eric Christensen was his name. Eric went on to law school later on. He encouraged me to go to law school, and I did go to law school, but that's a whole nother story. What a career that was, about 2 months. I went up and asked the professor, Patty knows all about this, what have I got? About another 5 minutes. Anyway, I'm trying to cover my life in a very short time because I'm in the checkout lane. So, okay. So I go up, we get to law school there. Well, first of all, graduated from East Tennessee State, they told me with your scores and everything and your grade point average, Wake Forest wrote me and said there could be no doubt that we can give you a scholarship to our law school. Well, I took heart with that, and this was back in the day where you didn't prepare, maybe y'all did, but you didn't take courses to learn how to take an exam. You remember, you just went in, and either you were an idiot or you did well and you told everybody. Well, here I was, the star of East Tennessee State, president of the student body and everything. I go down, we go to Knoxville, and Patty's with me, and we'd just been married a year, and we just did everything. We had a great time, didn't we, honey? And I remember calling my friend and telling him, he said, you better be still. I've got this flat. Well, here's the problem with taking exams. You better know the rules, all right? So I go in that morning in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I walk in, and they hand out the exams. Well, I start down through there, and I'm working to get everyone right. You know, I don't want to miss one. I'm going down through there. And I was very high in verbal and low in math, obviously. And so, right when I thought we got started, the fellow said, "Time is up." Well, I mean, I'm just going down through there like, well, I have got at least a third over a fourth to still do, probably a third. You know where I'm going with this, Clay. And they take the papers up, and that's it. Well, so it gets back to campus, and I go and see my advisor. I get my score. It was 380. I just answered, and then I left all of them blank. Well, when you add that up, you've been a teacher, that doesn't work out very well. So what I did, I decided, well, I'm just too dumb to go to law school and so on. And later on, Patty and I, we went into teaching, and Patty knows all about this. And by the way, she's great. Patty's got a show in Emory and Henry on Friday night, art show. She's terrific. And so Patty's going along with all this. And so I decided to teach at Linview High School over there with mountain kids over in East Tennessee. And that really matured me. And so taught English. And actually Jane Hicks, I know this is being recorded. I want to give a shout out, you say, to Jane Hicks, was one of my first students there back over at Linview High School, back over there outside of Kingsport, Tennessee. And she is now an excellent writer, and she wrote in about that we had such great times in my class, and I inspired her in literature. And one quick story about that, we're over there on a cold day. This is near the coal fields. I'm teaching, by the way, because I didn't go to law school because I didn't make high enough score, because you had to make 400. So I'm teaching, and so help me, I'm teaching The Crow, the Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And so it's cold, and I'm teaching ninth graders, and this crow, as I'm teaching, playing it on the radio or playing it on the stereo, the raven, quote the raven nevermore. If you want to get kids' attention, you're back over there in the coal fields with that soot you see coming down through there, and they look out and they see this big black crow on the windowsill. They thought I had supernatural powers. I'd already showed them a few karate moves, but that's another story. And they was like, oh, and Jane, Jane Hicks, who was brilliant, and has become a great quilt maker, great writer, and so on. She talks about, actually wrote a poem about it, and that is actually a true story. Now, I will not tell you the characters in that class, but I loved every one of them. So we went on back to University of Kentucky, Patty. Yep, Kentucky, and then I spent a lot of time out there at the horse farms, which helps me with that Walker Greyhound that we adopted that right now that I'm taking care of. So we were in Kentucky, and then we went out, came back and taught at Dobbins Bennett, where Skip Brown, Patty taught Skip Brown, and right over here if you go in the Coliseum, you'll see Skip's poster and everything. He went to Dobbins Bennett High School. She taught him in junior high, and he was coached by Buck Van Huss, an old mountain fella from over in Hampton, Tennessee. And Buck came there, and he had on overalls and so on. I thought, this is not going to work out. Buck said, yeah, I'm happy to be here. And it tells you how people relate, because if you ask Skip, Buck was a major influence on his life. And so he coached Skip, and we were there at Dobbins Bennett. And then I'm going to move along here. Then what else have we done? Well, first of all, we got married. We got married over Nashville, came to Boone, got married, drove over there and had our honeymoon. I later told Pat Conroy, the great writer, about that. Well, I didn't know he had he'd written about all of Thomas Wolfe and his grave and everything in a great book. And My Reading Life. If you want a great book by Pat Conroy, read My Reading Life. It's one of my favorites. And that's when he was down at Quail Ridge. So anyway, that we got married there, and then we started having children. We couldn't have them at first, so we were going to adopt out in Eugene, Oregon. We wound up in Eugene, Oregon. That's a whole other story. And we went out there, and we wound up in a little pop-top camper, and got broke and had to trade it. And we bought this old Nova station wagon, and Patty put curtains in it, and we just camped. We camped all over the Northwest. All right. So here we go. We're back now. About that time, I started teaching out in Eugene, Oregon, coaching a little bit. And I said, Patty, I think I want to go back to law. I want to give law school a try. And she said, okay. So I got that book, what you study. She took an aid timer, and I went down through there and so on, took the test, made 450, 460. She said, come on back, come on down to UT or whatever. And I went there and that summer for 2 months, and I went up to the law professor and I said, what else are we going to do here? I said, my God, all this is questions of law. This is the most boring stuff I've ever been into. Well, that doesn't go over well, you know. So he said, son, we're going to be doing this for the next 2.5 years till you get moved. Well, I wanted to be F. Lee Bailey, and they were talking about contracts. I wanted to be Clarence Darragh for the defense. What the hell am I in law school learning about these silly contracts, which, my goodness, you're a clerk. So anyway, we leave, and remember that fella at Wake Forest, they'd written me that letter that said, come on, we'll take you. So Patty and I get in that Volkswagen van. I think Johnny was with us, and we come out here to Wake Forest Law School, and I go in there. Now, I have long hair, and I'd been radicalized, right? So I go in, I sit down, I said, I'd like to transfer to law school. He said, where are you, University of Tennessee? He said, I got a good, decent program there. We'll take you in. He said, and he started listening to my philosophy. Well, after I started telling him my perspective, he got his cane, and he got up and started walking me to the door. And he said, good day, young man. And the young law school dean, I'll never forget, followed me down the sidewalk and said, look, he's retiring. I'd like to talk to you. Don't have time for you. I'm saying this because I really didn't want to go to law school. We go down to Chapel Hill, where my son-in-law is a distinguished graduate from, and my grandchildren are there. And I go in and talk to them. They say, yeah, we'll take you. Said, you can come to law school here. You got the background and so on. But said, you cannot come in August or September. I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, it's July or August. You know, you just don't, you come in the spring. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I think after that, we wound up back in Oregon. But later, Will Megan had me in moot court, both of us being performers for the defense when they have moot court. And I got to be an expert on not fire alarms, on the expert on identifying people who've done the arson. And so I played that role. And the professor said, man, he's good. That's what you're going to have to face when you get out there. Well, anyway, and by that time, right after that, that's when I went into prison reform. So we did 2 years of prison reform. Patty was with me all through that, and I met a lot of interesting characters. It was an upfront organization. And I can tell you that I learned about humanity. I learned about the goodness in people. I learned about the degradation of people. And I can tell you right now, folks, if you go down to your local jail and just walk up there, and Tommy, you work in it, but you ask them to see inside of it, it's a condition. It's a condition. Now, first of all, hey, Ivy Sheppard, come on in. Yay, Ivy. Ivy is the reason that I'm here, really, because she produces our show. Ivy is a world-class banjo player, as well as musician, as well as the whole director of WEHC 90.7, and we just, goodness gracious, I love working with her. She is so creative and random, but I'm going to tell you something. She's random, but she's getting to the end, right? She gets to the point. And Ivy, just say a couple of words here. I know you. I don't like to mince words too much. Well, I know you don't, but she'll come in, and she has taken this show, which is the reason I'm here. And by the way, Tanya has been on the show, and if you haven't had a chance to look around Wake Forest, please do as you come in. And we ran her show last night. The way I got met, Tanya, I came in here looking for Huckleberry Finn first edition, and I thought if anybody has it, Wake Forest Collections has it. And I came in here and they were so nice to me, and they got it out, and some William Butler Yeats. And by the way, Wake Forest publishes more Irish poets, is known throughout the world for performing, publishing Irish poetry. So Ivy Sheppard, who really traveled all over the world, didn't you, playing in Australia, everywhere, and then she decided that she was just going to settle down, right? A little bit.
Time to go to grad school, and pandemic kind of took the allure of being a traveling musician away, so I got a job running a radio station, and Henry is one of the first people I met, and we have a really special station up in Southwest Virginia that I think connects the community like not a lot of them do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you take a seat back there, right back there, and I'm going to finish up here in a minute, Ivy, because Ivy always watches the clock on me. And my goodness, a number of you, and all of you are part of my life. But I'm telling you, this radio show, I'm looking around at the people who really made me look good on the radio show. starting with Tanya and over here, my goodness, Brenda Humphreys, Maya Angelou, and Martha Bassett. Do y'all know Martha Bassett? If you're in Winston-Salem and you don't know Martha Bassett, and I wrote a poem about Martha one Christmas, and I'll spare you, but it is pretty popular. And Martha has that show on Saturday nights up in Elkin. And if you haven't been up to see her show, and if you haven't heard her sing, listen, you can listen to my show and hear her sing. But she's also on Wake Forest Radio too. So anyway, but all of you, and Lee Saunders here, he was one of the first people on. I could just look at, my goodness, and there you go, Pat's studio mate there, and all of you looking around. So I'm just okay. So moving into the later years, I'm going to read about 2 or 3 poems, and we'll just wrap this up here. And I really want each of you to introduce yourself. And God love you. It's always good to see you all. I'm telling you, Starbucks coffee, Muhammad Ali, famous, one of my favorites. You know that. So I've had conversations with you. This little book here, you know, I'm not a Thomas Wolfe or Ernest Hemingway, as you can imagine, but I'll tell you this. I learned that you could talk things, and when I was teaching, and I love teaching, and I tried to, and I applied what I'd learned. I'd learned from my other teachers, and Carl Rogers, I mentioned Carl Rogers. I tell you, I did a doctoral dissertation. Patty typed it, and we threw part of it out in the garbage can there at UT by mistake, and I was out there trying to get, that's back when you didn't have copies or anything. So anyway, my committee, you have to go through a committee. I'm not going to charge you extra for this, but this is Carl Rogers, Freedom to Learn. If you know counseling, you know psychology, you know Carl Rogers. So my committee would give me a rough time. So I had Carl Rogers in there. And so I'd send him a research thing to fill out. And this is the great Carl Rogers, but I'm going to tell you, the bigger people get, the reason they get bigger is because they have time for the little people. You know what I'm saying? So I just called him up. This is 1976, 77. They were there with 2 children. So I just called him up. And I get Carl Rogers on the telephone. Folks, if you've been around psychology, anything, you don't know how. He's in La Jolla, California. He'd been around, though. And he said, yes. And he listened because, you know, that's that non-directive counseling. And he said, yes. He said, I understand. He said, I'll have you a letter out tomorrow morning. 2 days later, now my committee had turned me down. Let's just be honest. And then I'd gotten angry and shoved my dissertation down at the end of the table and walked out, which is not the best way to perform. And Anand Malik, who was from India, who was my chair in the existential philosophy, for he understood me. So he got up and went over. He was the son of an Indian diplomat to Russia. And he goes over and starts playing the piano as I walk out. So I walked back in. And Anand was beautiful. You have a committee of 5. And Anand was chair. And he said, we can take care of this, can't we, Henry? I said, oh, yes. I didn't know. They had taken my dissertation and turned it into a statistical outline. And Patty had typed it up and so forth. But this before she got back to it. And so they said, we can put a modified chi-square in there and so on. And Tom Hood loved the man, but he shot me down, and he said, he was from sociology. He said, this is not going to work. So anyway, Anand said, well, Tom, what do you think it would take for Henry to get this dissertation done? How long would it take? Well, you're putting him on the spot. And Tom said, oh, it won't take more than 3 days. And Anand said, I will send him over to you and let you show him how to do it. So I go over there, and Tom gets carried away, and he does all the statistics for me. I copy it down, take it back to Patty, she types it, went back in, and they passed it. So that's how I got my dissertation. Carl Rogers, Freedom to Learn, really influenced me in particularly college teaching. So as we wind this up, and believe me, I'm going to wind it up. As we wind it up today, I fell into doing poetry because I was over in Southwest Virginia, and this is an hour-and-a-half story, Ivy knows. Richard Graves started with me, and then Ivy came on about halfway through. I started doing this 15 years ago. My goal was to do radio for 3 or 4 months, actually 12 shows. My goal was to do 12 shows. I'd never done radio, but remember, I was a thespian dramateer from Gray High School. So I figured I can figure this radio thing out. And if you haven't done radio, it's a different ball game. That clock is running. So anyway, somebody said, Henry McCarthy's down at the coffee shop doing poetry, and said, we need a poetry show at Emory and Henry, WEHC 90.7. I went up there and started doing it. And the first show, God love Patty, she says, I went home. She listened to me, and she said, you did it. And I said, yes, I did. And I said, how did I sound, honey? She said, you sounded like a cross between a college professor and a country preacher. Well, I took heart, and I had been emulating this country preacher from over in Big Stone Gap who was on TV. So I'd taken his style. But I got into Mark Twain. Mark Twain is really, if you've never really studied Mark Twain and you get to the depth of Twain and so on, got into him, got into his life and studied a lot. Went out to Hannibal. Patty, we did one show. I won't play you. We would do these recorders right here, and Brenda knows, all of you know about this. I'll just take this recorder out, pull it out of my pocket, and flip it on, let you start talking, or you talk over me, actually. And so that's the way we ended up with Poets and Writers, WEHC .9, and Mark Twain. I first got in. Then we got into putting music together. And when Richard Graves, he was the first producer, then he decided he'd go into art, and he's a great fan of Patty's. So he went into that, and then Ivy came on board. Ivy took it to a whole nother level. We do podcasts now. We first started off with CDs. We would record the CDs. And then we went to community archives. You can Google that, and Henry McCarthy's name with those archives will pop up. But this whole media thing is still scary to me. And you know, being here today and just talking with you all just up front and personally together is just such a joy. And Clay Hips, I'm just looking around here, and forgive me if I don't call your name. And Michael Hogan, you're down there in Guadalajara, and I know you're having a hard time today, but this is going to be recorded. Michael Hogan has been on the show about 3 times, and God love him. He wrote in and said he's sorry he couldn't be here, but he wrote The Irish Soldier in Mexico, and that's a whole nother story. You know, back during that time, the Irish came over here and they started fighting in the Mexicans, and they got down around Guadalajara, and there was a red-headed guy, I can't remember, they have a statue to him in Mexico City. And he started thinking about this. We're Catholic, we're poor, so why are we fighting the Mexicans? So they switched sides and fought for the Mexicans, which, if you think about it, made a lot of sense. The Mexicans loved it. You know, we get all pompous about who we are, but anyway, that's another side of the Irish. And I have a poem here, Never Read a How-To Book. Between Whitman's Leaves of Grass, Great Poets of the World, and Charles Bukowski's Notes of a Dirty Old Man were how to read poetry, how to write poetry, and how to present poetry. Obscene titles, totally obscene titles. I started to grab the book and stomp on the covers. However, that was not acceptable for my age and station in life. May I tell you something? May I tell you something? Never read a how-to book. Go deep into your soul, cry inside your heart, feel the rhythm of your joy and anger, then hurl your message to that friend or stranger who is much lonelier than you and who's read far too many how-to books. One further note, Patty and I, we're on a venture, and I want to mention our grandkids. We have 7, and we have Carter, Cooper, Story, and then we have the girls. We have Pearl and Coral, and then we have these 2 boys right back here. We have Sheppard Wilson Quick and Sutton Quick and Megan McCarthy. Let me give them a hand. So what we're doing, our next venture, you know, people say, I'm getting old. Folks, we are. But we're getting old, but we're getting more wisdom. And we're also getting more insight. So I asked Dr. Edwin Wilson, and again, if you go and Google, we've got him, Tanya's got him on podcast and on my show, he and Emily both. I asked him in that interview, I said, what is it? You know, Dr. Wilson, I said, and by the way, his office was right downstairs, you know. Yeah, I took the grandkids up to see him. We stopped the older 2 grandkids this years ago. I said, I'm going to take you upstairs to see a famous man. They looked at his portrait, and they looked at his bust down there, you know, the head and all. And they said, well, you can't do that, Granddad. And I said, why? They said, he's dead. And I said, why would you say that? And they said, they don't do that for people unless they're dead. So I took them upstairs. But what we're working on this month, we've saved, and Ivy knows about this, if you've ridden the Virginia Creeper Trail, we own 61 acres, and it was really an endurance contest to get a hold of that land. And we're putting it, trestles 5 and 6, when you ride it, you will be able to see that land from now, hopefully, till eternity, because we're putting it into a conservancy, the Virginia Outdoor Conservancy this month. And the developers were surrounding it, but we got that through. Also, I've got a little camper up there now. I was sleeping in a tent. Tanya, you came up. Yeah, I took you out there. Did I not have a tent out there? Yes, I did. Okay. All right. So that's what we're working on. And we also went out and adopted a dog. And he was 3.5. And the folks all said this is such a great rescue dog. Said he's so sweet and everything. He lies up on your bed and everything. Well, that's very nice, but a Walker Greyhound is a Walker hunting dog, and he's also part Greyhound. So we get him, and the very first day I was going to show him to some of my buddies. You know, over there, this is one, I've got to tell this. So here we go with Mr. Mann, Rick Mann, and we're out there, and I'm showing all the guys there. I just brought him back from Saving Grace down in Raleigh. Patty agreed to it. We're proud of him. Oh, he's such a nice dog and everything, and he is strong. I take him out, the 3rd time to show people. I open my van, and Walker fires out of there. He covers that parking lot, all of Renolda over there and Robin Hood Road. I thought we'd lost him. You're running around with some cream trying to get him to come to you, and he's running up and down Robin Hood Road on the side, smart as he could be. I thought he'd headed back to Raleigh. I really did. I thought, I got to go home and tell Patty the first morning this dog is done left, going back to Saving Grace. And so help me, he runs, comes flying. If you've ever seen a Walker Greyhound run, he's a beauty, isn't he, Ivy? And you have never seen a beautiful run. If you've seen racehorses in Virginia and those thoroughbreds, and he comes flying by me, and I'm like, zoom, right around me, goes around through the shopping center there, and runs into what I thought was a beauty shop. And it turned out to be a dog groomer. He sits down, and the woman comes out and says, come on in, to me. And I'm looking at Walker like, damn you, and he's like, it's true. You know, he has the demeanor of a prince. He really does, but we're working with him on that, and he's getting a little better every day. He pulled Patty down and chipped her arm, one thing up, but he doesn't mean anything. He really does. He just wants to run, and so that's what we'll be working on for the next few years. And listen, I want to be sure that we get, can you just very quickly introduce yourself? Go around very quickly, say who you are. Megan, you got?
Megan McCarthy Fleck, I'm his daughter.
Ivy?
Ray,
Haiku, been on the show, Haiku, and he's famous over at, you need something done over at the hospital, you get in touch with his picture portraits over there. Haiku, I actually went up there with one of the morgue and interviewed you, right? Where we had the dead people. Thank you so much, Rosemary.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm his niece, Rosemary McCarthy.
Who else back there?
Tadika Boko, I'm a friend of Miss Brenda Humphreys.
Okay. Right. And Betsy?
Betsy Johnson.
And we go back to Southwest Virginia poetry and so forth.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Parrott.
Dick Parrott.
Appalachian State.
Henry and I worked together at Appalachian for a number of years.
I'm Marcia Phillips. I'm on staff here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm Joni. I know Henry through Clay. Clay and Henry met in an unusual way.
Well, we met, I was over to storage unit sitting on a box of books. And Clay comes down through there and he said, "Oh, you're reading. I'm looking at these books I'm putting storage in the storage unit." He said, "I like books too." And I said, "I appreciate that." And he said, "Come on down and I'll show you my storage unit." And I went down there and it was this beautiful wine cellar, like you had all that wine in there like that. Then I got Clay on the show. He's been on the boat, and he's a great writer, and he described listening to one of our shows, which was really beautiful. I appreciate that, Clay. I appreciate you all coming. Yes, sir.
Mel Rutledge, I'm also a specialist.
Good deal.
Mary Beth Liker, I was working in the library.
Good deal.
Well, I'm John Tashner, and I got this email saying there's some good food on Saturday.
There you go. You don't know how true that is. How many times we've gone hungry at Washington, D.C.
I'm Charles, my name is Briganda Henry through Cycle.
Pretty someone.
I'm Jolene, we're dear friends of Patty and Henry.
All right, Lee.
I'm Lee Saunders. I'm delighted to meet you all.
And Lee is from, he went to school here.
Yeah.
And he dropped out his junior, sophomore year?
Middle junior year, 1967, to
There you
go
go.
on a 21-year sabbatical.
Absolutely. After that, came out. I had him on the show. I used to have to beg people to be on my radio show, and I get him out of the coffee shop in Abingdon, Virginia, and gosh, he's so well read, Marine and so forth. Background, went to high school with Bruce Springsteen. So I love him. Great story.
My claim to fame.
Oh, well, no, yes.
Norris Buchanan. I share the studio with his wife, Patty, so I'm a visual artist.
And I'm Patty, and you've heard enough about me.
Nancy.
Yes, I'm Nancy McCoon. Henry is a dear high school friend of ours.
I tell you, we had a good time.
We did.
Tommy McCoon, I'm one of the guys from Walton, and one of the stories that he didn't tell you is Bowman Gray Stadium, Wake Forest used to play all their football games over there. So Henry and Harold Stevens and myself would go to the back. The guys there would, the food guys would say, "You guys come on, we climb the fence."
Yes.
We never paid for a game, and if you ever have a chance to see Brian's song with Brian Piccolo, that was his senior year, and we saw every game that he played. So Henry's a dear friend from Walton.
Yeah, we taught Tommy some bad ways. We taught him to climb the fence and slip in. You know, poor kids don't say we did this or that. We use the term, "Did you slip in?"
But Henry was always the instigator.
There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
And I am Edna Blevins. I am his sister, and I am starving.
She's on I thought you were on a special diet. You could only eat rice. And Jennifer, my dear brothers.
Jennifer McCarthy.
Yes, Johnny's daughter. Okay, Kay, did I leave anything out? Anybody gonna get mad at me?
I think everybody has been introduced.
I covered all the kids.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Oh, Karen.
John's
Good night. Karen Johnson, I kept seeing you. I didn't see you sitting over there. Well, bless your heart, she was the greatest graduate student. Because remember, I did all that mimeograph running things off, and they were going to get me for using too much paper. And Karen said, "Well, I don't know what the heck they're talking about or something." I never forgot that because, you know, Garth Brooks, I'm going to charge you extra for this. And I couldn't quote William Butler Yeats, but one of the things about Garth Brooks said one time, I saw him interviewed, he said his dad told him this. He said, within a couple of minutes, when you meet somebody, you can tell whether they have your back or not. And I believe that. And I believe every one of you in here have my back. And God love you and thank you.
Introduced us.
Oh, well, okay, front row, yes. I thought I covered that. Go ahead.
Lauren M. Mann, I work here at WEHC, but I'm married to the man that helped catch the dog.
Rich Man, this is my Starbucks buddy. We're back talking about critical thinking skills. That's what we're back.
Absolutely, absolutely, folks. You can't have too much critical thinking skills. And he went up. He was from Louisville. And he met Muhammad Ali, who's one of my favorite athletes, and of course Martha and Brenda. Lord, what an interview on Maya Angelou. Brenda used to work with Maya, and she can read poetry. Don't tell Maya, she won't. She can read it as good, if not better.
Yes, she said, "Don't even think about it."
She tells us, we have all these on podcast. I just put them on podcast. And, yeah, no, I mean, thanks. I Ivy's got to get back up the road because they're having a big shindig. And if you haven't been into Emory and Henry in Southwest Virginia, come up and I'll take you down to the Carter phone. Now, I haven't even told you about my experiences with Johnny Cash and that kind of thing.
One other thing, I grew up around Walltown too, just down from Bowman Gray Stadium. And we used to say we had a spring and fall ticket. We spring over the fence and fall.